Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a good time so far. Just doing a quick intro to our next segment. It's something that I'm sure a lot of you would look forward to because it's our panel discussion. So in past years, our panel discussion has always brought out a lot of helpful insights and tips that entrepreneurs give to each other. And at Small Business BC, we often hear from our clients that they are trying to overcome different hurdles in their businesses. And they also need extra resources and extra motivation and inspiration to help them break through. So this next presentation should be very helpful because we have a very amazing panel who will talk about real life stories of how they overcame their business challenges. So we'll be hearing from Nicole McLaren, the founder and CEO of Raven Reeds, Sam Morris, Operations Director and founder of FarOut Wilderness, Brian Smith, CEO of Persephone Brewing Company, and Ryan Popoff, who is the founder of Popoff Leather. And last but not least, of course, we have Karley Cunningham, the founder of Big Bold Brand, who will be moderating today. So before we dive into the panel discussion, a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions for Karley and our panelists, you can send them in our chat. So there is a Q&A button on the top right of the chat box. So you can pop your questions in there and we will address these questions in the last 10-ish minutes of the presentation. This panel discussion will be recorded and we will share these recordings with you after the event. So without further ado, I'm just going to pass the torch over to Karley, our moderator for today, who also is the amazing host of our podcast Made Possible, which is made in partnership with Small Business BC and Big Bold Brand. So Karley, over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Nicole. I don't feel like I need to say anything further about myself. That was such a fantastic introduction. So thank you for that. But most importantly, hello, everyone. Our esteemed panelists today. I'm very excited to talk to you and all of our audience. Welcome. You know who I am and you know what I'm here to do. So before we begin, I would like to gratefully and graciously acknowledge that Small Business BC, Big Bold Brand, and a lot of the rest of us today are situated on the transition. Here we go. Wow, this is going to be a day, folks. Okay, let me try this again because I'm not being very gracious right now. I would like to gracefully and gratefully acknowledge that we are on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded Coast Salish territories. We wish to respectfully acknowledge the homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Now, this is one of my favorite sessions to host. This is my third one, and I am super excited to be here today to hear from 4 leading businesses from across BC. I'm looking forward to hear their stories, to pull out some threads, to really dig in about how they started, what challenges they have faced, and what steps they have taken to grow their businesses into what they are now. So thank you. And once again, welcome to Brian Smith, CEO of Persephone Brewing, located in Gibsons, Sam Morris, Operations Director and founder of FarOut Wilderness in Souk, Ryan Popoff, founder and owner of Popoff Leather in Nelson, and Nicole McLaren, CEO and founder of Raven Reeds, located in Kamloops. Welcome, gang. How are we all doing today?
Great, thank you.
Brilliant.
Yeah, really well.
Perfect.
Thanks.
So it's so wonderful to have you all here. We've got a great mix of businesses and from many different industries and areas of our province. So let's just get to it. As a business owner myself, I know about the thrills and challenges of starting a business, let alone growing one. And I know you've all done that and you're all well versed in that. And today we're going to discuss your individual experiences of growth and overcoming the obstacles that you've all encountered to getting to where you are now. And of course, all the things we're still learning. Thank you, pandemic. Can we stop talking about that? Seriously. So for our audience, grab your pens or note capturing device of choice, because I suspect that you're going to discover some business brilliance, some great tips and strategies during today's session to apply to your own business. All right. So because not everyone is as privileged as I am to know your stories, I would like you to each introduce yourself and tell us a bit about the story of the starting of your business and the founding of your business. And Brian, how about we start with you?
Certainly. Thank you, Karley. Thanks everyone for having me. Thanks for including us in this opportunity. So Brian Smith, I was one of the co-founders of Persephone Brewing Company, which is a a brewery, a craft brewery that is based on a farm in Gibsons, BC. The co-founders and myself all worked before we started Persephone in what I'll call sort of the social enterprise or impact business space. So I was working in the downtown east side at the time, and my co-founders and I had started a number of different sort of impact businesses, social enterprises, and I was also a home brewer, and realized it's really not that hard to make great beer. And should do it on at scale so that I don't have to pay for it. And we decided to try and take a unique tack to the craft beer opportunity and quickly growing marketplace, and do it on a farm, so that not only could we connect our brewing operation to the farming activities, including growing hops on site and so on and so forth. But we could connect our consumer base to kind of a bigger issue that craft beer and food products are as much about our well-being as they are about our community and our earth. So we built our brewery on a farm, and I can go into some more details a little later about all the different aspects of that, but it sort of speaks to our why. It's not just about making more alcohol for parties. It's about trying to use business as a force for good.
Brilliant. Thanks, Brian. I'm super excited to dig further into that story. And I would actually disagree with you. I think there is a talent to making a really damn good beer. So let's just leave that there, and let's go over to Sam. How did you guys start a travel company? And I know you're not originally from here, so maybe that's part of your story. And tell us a little bit more about what's unique about FarOut Wilderness.
Thanks very much, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So I am Operations Director and co-founder of FarOut Wilderness. We specialize in overland backcountry travel, so opening up some of the back roads. We've got fully kitted out overland trucks. We've got Tacomas and Forerunners that come fully equipped with rooftop tent, kitchen, fridge, safety gear. You've got a two-way GPS messenger to get in touch with us if you get into trouble out in the cell phone range. So it really came, we used to live in Malawi in southern sub-Saharan Africa, and we were there for about 12 years. That's actually where me and my wife met, who was also my business partner. And we eventually at some point decided that we were going to move to BC, Canada, because it's absolutely gorgeous. And we were over in, I think it was 2018, doing a bit of a recce to see whether this is somewhere where we wanted to live. And we noticed that there was no kind of like company offering overland travel at that time in BC. And we went back to our home in Malawi, and I think it was over dinner like a week later, Abby sort of was like, oh, I mean, we could do that when we're there. And I kind of like pushed it off at the time. I was like, oh, I don't think anybody would want to do that. But then, the seed had been sown, and once I sort of like start to think about something, I like to get my claws in, and so I started doing some research and realized there was no competitors at the time. And I think a few months later, we had the business name, the logo, the domain name, the business plan all sketched out, and what have you. But then obviously we landed in Canada, and we had a daughter, and sort of within 6 weeks of landing, so it took a bit of a slow launch to get started in 2019 with a soft season. And then over the sort of the sales period of leading up to 2020, it really started to kick off, and we were really excited. And then the pandemic hit, and we lost all of our booking pipeline pretty much overnight. So it's been a hell of a ride, but we're still here, and we'll get into a bit about how we got through that later. But that's us, and that's FarOut Wilderness.
Well, the point of hell of a ride, I think, applies to most of your business. Someone who's new to overlanding myself, who went out and bought a right-hand drive 4x4. Hey, I'm excited that you guys are here. So there'll be more to dig into on that. Nicole, tell us more about Raven Reads. What's the story? What's your why?
Thank you. So my name is Nicole McLaren. I'm the founder and CEO of Raven Reads. We are an Indigenous-owned, Indigenous-themed subscription box that features Indigenous books and giftware curated from entrepreneurs and authors across North America. I was our founder story. I was working full-time downtown Vancouver, and I had a 2-hour commute either way. It was 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission had just released its final report, and I was looking for ways to engage my coworkers in this important movement. I actually started a book club with my coworkers where we focused exclusively on books written by Indigenous authors. And I quickly saw how well just the simple act of reading these books really helped people start to connect the dots between historical trauma, contemporary trauma, and intergenerational trauma. So I started to see an opportunity to bundle these incredible books written by Canadian authors with the subscription box model. So I spent about 2 years commuting on a lot of trains and buses, working on my business plan on my phone, and with the generous help of Small Business BC, and we launched in 2017. So since our launch, we've grown from assembling 100 boxes in my basement with my family and neighbors to shipping out thousands of boxes out of our new warehouse in Kamloops, BC. And that brings us to today. Thank you.
Amazing. Congratulations on your growth. Given our upcoming first national honoring and holiday coming up on the 30th, I'm very excited to have you here and also have you help us, and it's not in the script, so I'm going to put you on the spot possibly later, but have you help us help understand how we can best, as those who are not Indigenous, celebrate and honor and reconcile and honor the truths that are coming up. And then now that we have this space to do so that is nationally recognized. So thank you for being here. And Ryan, here's the groaner. How did you pop off this idea about creating leather goods?
Thanks. Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. And thanks to everyone who is attending today. This is a cool opportunity. And I love talking about business and especially myself. So I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, so my name's Ryan Popoff, and we started our business 8 years ago. And what we do is a direct to consumer leather goods company. Kind of worded that weird, but essentially we just sell online. We have a warehouse here in Nelson, BC, and we have 20 people working full time sewing wallets. And this all started through a hobby. I went to art school and graduated. I was really into sculpture. Got a 9-to-5 office job, as you do when you graduate art school. And I was looking for something to do on my spare time, and I always wanted to make a wallet, always wanted something that was unlike something you would buy in a store. So no branding, none of that gimmicky stuff, no Velcro, made out of nice leather. And so I decided to become a leather crafter and got obsessed with it and kept doing it until I made that perfect wallet, put it up on Etsy. My wife, she convinced me to do that. And there's no better validation in the world than a stranger giving you money for something you've made. So that just kind of encouraged me to keep going. And it snowballed, and I used that money to reinvest into the hobby, get better tools, material, and so on and so forth, until fast forward 8 years ahead. And yeah, that's what we do now. This is a hobby turned into a pretty successful business.
Pretty successful business. I've seen your products. I would, can we just remove that? A really successful business who makes really great goods. So thanks. Congratulations. As someone who went to art school myself, I understand that journey of, now I was in graphic design, but still being a maker. That creative process is always that question of, and I'm excited for the audience members who may be on that journey, who may be in that space of, can I take a hobby, can I take my creations and bring them to life and make them a business? So I'm very excited to have you here. I want to start to pull on threads, you're welcome, and dive in a little deeper. And I want to circle back to the fact that Persephone Brewing Company is a B Corp. And I know it is something that is definitely important to your business's mission. So now that you are a certified B Corp, do you hold yourself to a certain standard in your business practice, Brian?
Yeah, we certainly do. The tricky thing is that standard keeps increasing, like keeps raising. And so just real quick, for those who don't know B Corp, it's a third-party certification program that assesses the quality of a business, really. And they assess the quality of the business in terms of how you treat your employees, how you treat the environment, what kind of product you provide, and what kind of contribution you might make through that product, how you interact with the community, and those kinds of variables and assessment metrics give you a score, essentially. And it's above a certain threshold, you can certify as a B Corp. There's several thousand B Corps around the country, around the world now. Lots of really well-known brands like Patagonia and Ben and Jerry's and others are leading the way as B Corps. And it's fun to be a part of that network and that growing community of progressive companies. So to your question, yeah, certainly there is a standard. I mean, if nothing else, I mean, you need to meet a certain standard of policies and practices in order to be certified. So that's the minimum bar just to be certified. The trick thing, the challenging thing, frankly, is that once you declare, especially publicly and especially with your employees with whom you have a really deep dedication and commitment, that you're going to be as progressive as possible, everybody starts to ask, well, what are you doing next? Like, how's that good enough? So every issue that comes out, from climate change to inclusivity to, every other issue, women in brewing, et cetera, needs to become, really, our response to that needs to be really thoughtful and meaningful, and maybe even providing leadership to other breweries that aren't B Corps, right? And so all of a sudden it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, there's great sort of consumer cachet around being a progressive brand and having a certification like that. On the other hand, it's a fairly substantial draw on time and resources and energy to try and keep up and be the best company, that we can be all the time. So it's, really great. And it's not, not that easy to be trying to be better and better.
So to that, I'm curious what advantages there are for your business as a B Corp, assuming that some of the audience is thinking, well, wow, that sounds like a lot. I'm inspired to check it out. Tell us why.
Yeah. And the advantages are definitely worth the troubles that come with them. Big ones are employee retention is great. A lot of our employees have been with us, going on 10 years. And are really committed, even in the early years when you can barely afford to pay people what they're worth. They believed in sort of that higher, goal and the aspiration to be a good company and to be good for our community. So that's great. I would argue sort of somewhere between sort of customer loyalty and community building is a really valuable aspect, especially for a consumer brand like a beer company, and for that matter, as a farm, to be deeply connected to your community and to the people who buy, and their values are our values. It becomes, brand loyalty and repeat customers, and lots of people tell us stories about how they bring, when their brothers come to, and sisters come to visit them on the Sunshine Coast, they bring them to Persephone, and everybody who, has a visitor coming brings them. So our market has grown, and our market sort of share has been only strengthened with the B Corp, kind of commitment. And then the third layer of really great advantage is that you're partnered, you have natural alignment with some amazing companies out there, and progressive leaders who likewise want to do really good things. And so fun collaborations like Salt Spring Island Coffee is in our Mocha Porter, and just natural collaborations like that. Or us among a number, I think there was something like a couple hundred Canadian breweries all closed on the climate strike day. And so we said, let's make a big statement. You don't get beer today because, the climate crisis is a real thing. So those connections with the network that have aligned values has a huge value for our business and for our people and for our community.
There's so much. There's so many threads that I just want to pull on. One of the things that I want to celebrate is that you haven't leaned just on one thing to make you unique. I'm always when I'm working with our clients, I'm like, it's never one thing that just makes you unique, because if it's one thing, someone else is going to catch up, or a bunch of people are going to catch up. And how do you stay in that unique space? And you've focused on what my coach would call peanut butter and jelly partnerships, those things that fit really well together. And also the farm aspect is something that is truly unique about what you do. And I know you run various farm programs. Can you tell us more about those and how that also fosters the aspect of community?
Yeah, certainly. This is frankly my favorite part of our whole project is the farm side. So just to clarify, or sort of situate everybody's mind, picture in your mind, if you haven't been to Persephone, we're a relatively small farm, so it's around 11.5 acres. The nice thing, so on one hand, it's a small farm, good arable land. We've had to work our fields to get them really, high functioning. But the other nice thing about our farm is it's very high profile. So everybody who drives off of the ferry on into Gibson's, just about everybody, goes up past the bypass and drives right past our farm, where they see a great big red barn, which has our brewery in it, and another big red barn, which has our warehouse in it, and big stainless steel tanks. And we used to have like 20-foot high hop trellises growing hops in the summertime. So what we've been able to do is really kind of use that farm as a major aspect of our brand and of getting people's attention, especially in a highly saturated craft brewing scene, right? There's more than something 600 or 700 breweries now in BC. So that allowed us to really sort of differentiate ourselves very quickly. And then, but where it got more interesting was what we can do with that connection. So one sort of relatively small example, and we're real big subscribers into regenerative agriculture. I may say regenerative agriculture many times in this session, because I really think it has such an amazing opportunity in terms of both providing food and addressing food security, while at the same time addressing climate change in terms of sequestering carbon, which is arguably our biggest issue of our generation. So as we started thinking about that, like just one small example, when you make beer, you have a whole bunch of spent grain, which is essentially barley and other grain crops that have no more sugars left in them. And you need to do something. Many breweries send them off to livestock farmers as feed. Many breweries have to pay to get rid of it. It's like a waste product. For us, we take it down and we blend it with wood chips and other food waste and create compost, which then goes on to our farm fields and helps grow vegetables and apples and barley and so on. And so we're creating a cycle of waste to food that is truly regenerative. And not only is it helping with our our cost of goods in terms of not having to buy soil amendments and so on, but it's sequestering carbon into the soil and building healthier soil and a healthier ecosystem. We do the same thing with bees and honey, and with our wastewater is plumbed into our irrigation systems, and so there's lots of opportunities where a food-based business like a brewery located on a farm just can sort of have a multiplier effect of impact in terms of both the business model, the community, and the land. So I don't know why all breweries aren't based on farms, quite frankly. And I feel like we're seeing more and more of them come around.
I'm super excited that you're leading the way. I'm very excited at the fact that you are a natural leader, in that you are excited to communicate and can clearly communicate that. And there's a hidden underarching action item that I want to pull out of what you just said for our audience. And it's, how can you make it easy for your customers to buy from you? And how I see you make it easy is, well, why would we choose anybody else, aside from maybe flavor, to be fair, but why would we choose anybody else? Because I feel so good when I buy from a company like yours, someone who is going above and beyond to make a difference for all of us. So coming back to that, and our audience is asking yourselves, how do I make it easy for our customers, our ideal ones, those who love us and will rave about us forevermore? How do we make it easy for them to partner with us, buy from us, and just feel good about being in our community? So thank you for that. I am going to go to Nicole and ask you, as an Indigenous business that distributes Indigenous content, what inspired you to start this initiative? And I know you touched a little bit on that, but I'm always curious, and I'm always pushing folks to talk about what are the problems that we solve for the world, for our ideal clients. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. So, like I said, Raven Reads was really spurred on by the reconciliation movement in 2015. And what I saw at the time was a lot of people wanting to participate and feeling an obligation to participate in the conversation, but not really having the tools in front of them to do so. So whether you're an educator, a homeschooling parent, or you're just in the workplace and you're looking for ways to integrate this conversation, and there's just a lot of questions about how can I do this and how can I improve things. So Raven Reads is really that quintessential toolbox that you can not only get amazing literature delivered to your door that you can read in the comfort of your own home, but there's also giftware in there. So you are also supporting the Indigenous economy and supporting other small businesses and entrepreneurs across Canada and the US. So while we started with this strong social purpose, that was a little bit of a gray area, and we weren't quite sure how to articulate how we sat in that. Just through our efforts, we've also now invested over $400,000 back into the Indigenous economy just through the procurement of goods for our boxes. So it's a win-win for our subscribers. It's a great way to participate in the conversation. We have an amazing online community as well, where we encourage people to have a bit of a dialogue on this. And then you're also supporting other small businesses to help them scale through our boxes.
Brilliant. Let's talk about September 30th. Let's talk about, I mean, an easy low-hanging how right now for how we can participate in this is to support your business. Beyond that, can you give us some recommendations for how we can effectively participate in this day so that voices are heard, change is made, and reconciliation continues? Because it is all of our, and mostly our, I say this from a colonist perspective, it is our responsibility.
Mm-hmm. From my perspective, I think it's a matter of keeping the conversation going and not having this just be distilled down to one day of the calendar year that we have this conversation. So it's continuous support of Indigenous entrepreneurs, as well as kind of taking on the responsibility for all of us to continue to learn and continue to open our minds up to different perspectives of our past in Canada, and just understanding that everybody has a very different lived experience in this country, and we are not a homogenous group, both as Canadians, but as Indigenous peoples, we are all very different with different experiences. So my ask and my greatest recommendation is just continue learning, continuing to find new ways of being engaged. It's not just a matter of reading really lengthy blog posts, but it's also just getting out in the community and speaking to people from other communities as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I also know, having had two of our podcast guests who are Indigenous business owners, is always fact checking. Who's behind the product? Is this just a mass produced something because it's, this year it's about buying an orange t-shirt? It's always about fact checking and making sure you are buying authentically Indigenous creations.
Yeah, this year definitely set off a really unique challenge in the supply chain of orange t-shirts. And it also put a lot of Indigenous entrepreneurs in kind of a weird spot where they were trying to provide these authentic products and they weren't able to source the materials for that. Raven Reads is a great tool where you can be supporting entrepreneurs and we can provide that authenticity of where we get our products from. But there's definitely kind of this growing need for consumers to just kind of peel back the curtain a little bit and see who's really involved, whether it's an Indigenous owner or, there's a legitimate connection between the proceeds from your purchase going to a nonprofit that serves a legit purpose.
Excellent. That's fantastic advice as to how and where can we figure this out. So thanks for digging into that much deeper. I'm going to turn over to Sam at FarOut Wilderness. I know that you pride yourself on being able to share the sense of freedom and connection with nature. What are your business objectives? Wow, I feel like it's Friday and I can't talk and my tongue's just tied in knots today. What are your business objectives beyond revenue growth, and how are you measuring them?
So I think one of the key ones for us beyond growth is customer satisfaction for us. We have a pretty good feedback loop from our clients. So each of our trips finishes with a proper debrief of the client. It's not just a grab the keys, all right, off you go. What worked well, what didn't, and how can we improve, and sort of get that raw data fresh. And then we have a feedback survey that we get each of our clients to fill out, which helps us track our NPS score. So, like, for those that aren't aware, that's the Net Promoter Score. It's a really good way of tracking how you're doing with your clients, particularly for a service-based business. And it asks a simple question. It's like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you recommend us to your friends and family? And it's a really good way of seeing whether you've got people out there that are your promoters, that are like really raving about your services and your company, or whether you've got people out there that are sort of determined detractors, which are they didn't have a good service. Worst of all, they're probably bad mouthing you. And so if you've got a low or negative NPS score, you've got people out in the world that are actively not happy with you. And where if you've got a really high NPS score, that you're nailing that customer satisfaction and like the overall experience that they're having with you. So that's one of the key metrics we track with customer satisfaction. And then along with that, we're trying to really develop our social responsibility level. We're partnering with Pure Kids, which is a foundation based in Kelowna, that support children and families that are vulnerable. And then we're also partnering with a company to get back to our sort of roots with the African wildlife. Is we're partnering with one of the wild dog foundations based in Zambia, where we did a lot of our overlanding trips. So building those two objectives along with the revenue is key for us.
Fantastic. I want to dig into one term here, because I know for a lot of Canadians, the word overlanding is completely new. And yeah, I want everybody to know about what that is, because it's the heart of your business. Tell us a little bit more about overlanding.
So overlanding by definition is a trip where the journey is the main goal, not necessarily the destination. So it's a self-reliant adventure, usually across back roads. It doesn't have to be. You can overland it any way that you want that is comfortable to you, but it's more about the journey than the destination, which I think also is really nice, because that's kind of how we see our business as well. So overlanding, when we talk about overlanding, you can do it in a van, you can do it in a truck with a rooftop tent, but it's more being sort of self-reliant. So you've got your water and your power and your fridge and everything's all on board, and you can go off for a few days or weeks, however well equipped you are. And you've just got the freedom to go off the beaten path and go off the route. Like if you find somewhere that you want to stay for a few days, you've got that freedom to do it. Or if you want to go see what's down that road, you can go and do that. That's one of my favorite things with when we go off in the bush together, is just picking a road and seeing where it goes and seeing what is at the end of it. And sometimes it's a really great viewpoint, and sometimes we have to do a dodgy 3-point turn.
So that opens the door wide open. In full disclosure, my wife called me the magic eraser. I can see risk a mile away, and I'm like, okay. And it gets in my way from actually, truly overlanding sometimes. But I want to talk about it in the context of your business and the client experience. There seems like there would be a ton of risk to how you deliver a client experience. Pick a road, have fun, guys. Wherever you end up, you end up. How do you mitigate just human choice, human curiosity? Because ultimately, your business relies on someone having a positive experience. And imagining, one of your clients stuck in the mud, 200K out on a fire road, what things can you put in place, or do you, and just how do you design that client experience to make sure they still love you at the end of it?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, and it's one that we're just continuously getting better at. And we definitely don't have the right model right now, and we probably won't for a very long time, just because you think you've plugged all the gaps and someone manages to prove you wrong. But it starts right from the beginning of when they first get in touch with us and understanding what they want to get out of the trip, and then we help build that. And it's sort of setting the client expectation. So some clients, when we'll explain what the different level of roads are, the different level of camping options, you know, from provincial parks, rec sites down to wilderness spots, what that comes with, what it like entails, you know, and some clients will explain that they're not comfortable camping without a toilet. And it's like, okay, well, that limits where, like, what you can do. It really does go down to the sort of like managing the expectations from the outset. And then in terms of managing the risk, we have a pretty in-depth handover process. It takes about an hour, and we go through all aspects of the vehicle, how to use the 4x4, how to use the recovery gear. We get them to do a test message from the GPS messenger, go through all of the equipment, go through, most clients we develop a route with them. So we try any route that we recommend, we've actually driven ourselves. So particularly on Vancouver Island, a lot of our off-road routes are routes that we know, and we can advise whether it's suitable for a beginner or whether it's suitable for an intermediary or what have you. We do try and stress that if you're going to go down a road that you're not familiar with, to make sure you have an escape route. It is one of those businesses that's really tough, because you want everybody to have the freedom to do what they want, but you also have to have rules. And so managing that balance is one of the most trickiest aspects, I would say.
Fantastic. Balancing that expectation and the client, I love the question of, what do you want to get out of this journey? And every single one of us that's here today or listening to the recording can do well in our business simply by asking that question. Yeah. What's the result we want to achieve? What's the result our clients want? How do we mesh those two together? So thank you for walking through that. You're really
building something that is built for the customer, as opposed to saying, this is what you should do. You can, because everybody, and I think every client we've had this year has had a different answer to that question.
No kidding. Especially with all the limitations in place. And I'm so excited for everything to open up for you in the next couple of years. Really excited to see where you take this. All right, Ryan, coming back to you. Give us some insights into your journey of building and growing your brand. When did you realize that the products had potential to become something bigger than just products?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a question that every entrepreneur asks themselves at a certain point. You know, you reach this fork in the road. And for me, it was coming from a hobby to the point where, you know, people started giving me money and validating these ideas that I had, these products that I wanted to produce, not something that I, you know, did market research on. It was just kind of my gut leading me. And eventually you get to the crossroads where it's like, okay, I'm making more or as much money doing my hobby as I am, you know, going to work every day, 9 to 5, thinking about it. So do you leap into the unknown and kind of take that risk, or do you keep doing it as a hobby? And it was sort of at that point where I knew there was potential, and to take it, you know, to jump into the unknown. Actually, I still remember the conversation with my now wife, where we were like both crying in a park because we saw the potential, but it's honestly, it's like jumping into a black hole. Like, what do you do? You know, what if we don't sell any more wallets? Like, what if people don't want to buy from us anymore? You know, thankfully I didn't make that leap, and here we are.
The fear is definitely real. And it's also one of those, there's always a visual metaphor in my head. I'm definitely a visual thinker. And it's always that we can stand on the ledge and just stare at the ledge forever. But a baby eagle doesn't learn to fly unless they either jump, fall, or get booted out of the nest, right? And so it's the only way you're going to learn how to fly is to try. And you don't have to jump from the chasm. You can jump from the first tree limb and give it a shot.
That's
You
true.
can jump from the top of the roof next and give it a shot. And yeah, so thank you for sharing that with us, because we all come to those points in our business, whether we're ready to start it, whether we're ready to leave that side hustle, whether we're ready to jump into the big partnership or the scale. There will continuously be those moments throughout business. So I know you take exceptional pride in the quality of your products. And in a world where companies are constantly finding ways to cut cost and pull back and do less to try and achieve more, how does your approach to quality affect your decision-making and your revenue model?
Yeah, so there's a few reasons. So much so that, quality is one of our core values. So it's one of the pillars that we've built the business on. Initially it comes down to what kind of company would I want to support? And that's the kind of person that I want to be and the kind of company that I want to build. So for me, I choose to support companies that create goods that are meaningful and last, not disposable products. So that was sort of paramount to me. The other thing is what sets us apart in sort of an ocean of competitors making wallets. Like when I started in 2013 on Etsy, you would do an Etsy search and leather wallets would return 500,000 different listings. So what makes you different? So for me, and what we continue to do, and this is going to sound like an advertisement for Popoff leather, but some of the things that we do, everything's made in-house. None of it's outsourced. We source everything from Canada or the United States. Everything's almost everything is sewn by hand. Like who does that anymore? We have a lifetime warranty, 90-day returns. These are all sorts of things that are things that set us apart. And how do you know that's working? Well, people come back and buy from us. We have a 25% repeat purchase rate with our customers. They'll come back and they'll buy gifts. They'll come back and, buy a matching belt for the wallet that they got, all because they had an exceptional experience and the product that they received was, phenomenal. We have over 6,000 five-star reviews. We have a monthly average, and Sam, you already touched on NPS scores, but we're averaging a 9 on our NPS scores. These customers that keep coming back are the reason we're growing our business. And in the early years, when you don't have a ton of cash or revenue to spend on cost per click advertising, you rely on your reputation and that word of mouth to help you grow. And it's helped us double our revenues every year, remain profitable. Every year in the 8 years we've been in business, we've doubled our revenue year over year.
For our audience, if that number didn't just land with a thud, it should. That is unheard of. And I would suspect in pulling on so much in what you just said was gold. And one of the things that you talked about was we don't just sell products, we deliver an experience. And that is key and critical to achieving results that you've achieved. One of the other things that you spoke to that everyone has touched on, whether they've said it without a cover on it or without in a layer, is that it's about values. It's about what are our fundamental beliefs and truths as the people who run these business that we bring to the business, that we weave into the business. And all four of you have done that exceptionally. You've brought yourselves to the business. And so often when I work with businesses who have grown and accelerated and they're in, their 10th and their 15th year, and maybe leadership is changing over, often the senior leaders, I don't know if they feel it, but I can see they've moved at a distance from their company. They've been in the doing the business, and as we dig into some of the evolutions of their brand and some of the uncoverings as to why did you start this business and what are your fundamental values that you bring to this business that are important for anyone who steps in our business to have, is when you move closer, when we bring those business owners back to them, they light up again. because they're like, that's right. That's why I started this business. That's who I am. That's how who I am is woven into this business. And I would say to everybody here, and I know all four of you know it deeply and intimately, but to our audiences, be very conscious of what gets between, whether the barriers get between or how far you move away from the why we started this business, and the values that we have are, you know, deal breakers. Don't break the deal breakers. You got to run this business. As a small business, it's typically you or the founders forevermore. So really honor those pieces. Do any of you want to add to that? As I see you're all nodding.
No, it's if I can just add to that. So when we talk about core values, having those core values is essentially, you know, what I discovered was I was describing myself, you know, and it was really interesting. We did this exercise with our employees, and I had a chart, and I said, okay, you know, how would we describe ourselves to customers? How do we, you know, how do we conduct ourselves internally? Like if you're asking for help, like what are the sort of keywords that describe us? And it all boiled down to everything I was thinking, and it was really cool. So like the way that I was leading the business was sort of being imparted on everyone without having these specific core values set in place. So having those core values not only has this effect on everyone who sees it, but it also affects the way that you run your business, the people you hire, the culture. And, you know, if there's one thing to take away from this is to kind of look at what's important to you, like you're saying, Karley, and come up with those core values and use those as your guiding principles going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Interchangeable terms. We call them guiding principles when we build them. I can tell you that I have dissolved a successfully growing business because my business partner and I weren't aligned. We were saying the same things, but when we dug into the deeper layers of, well, what does family first actually mean to you, was different from what family first meant to me. What integrity defined, I mean, integrity is an output. You know, we talk about a lot of things, and I know in a product business, quality is absolutely for most a guiding principle, but if often quality, service, trust, integrity, those are all outputs of doing what you say you're going to do and showing up how you say you're going to show up. And it's so important to make sure that those are out of your head and on paper, because otherwise it's almost like they're following you around trying to figure out, well, what exactly do you mean by that? So yeah, anybody else want to add to that before I change gears? Yeah, Nicole.
Yeah, and I, just listening to both talk about this, it really highlights the difference, the different headspace you can be in as a startup founder, and as you grow and you kind of transition from that entrepreneur to a leader. And I know when you're first starting, you're really, especially if you're kind of come from this bootstrap place, you're really just about developing this viable product and proving it out in the marketplace, and then traction, getting it growing. And you can easily get so swamped in just managing a sustainable business. And then as you start to bring on team members, I know I've done this in the last 2 years, I really start to think, I actually need to take a step back and revisit our values and ensure that that's really being, I'm bringing in our team into what some of those founding principles were, and ensuring that they're on board with that and aware of that as they go about their day-to-day business. So there's this kind of weird transition period just to be aware of, where you kind of go from just that build and sell the product to really taking a step back and looking at, okay, now this is a business and I'm a leader, and how am I, really embedding those principles in everything we do.
Absolutely. There is no set it and forget it. It just doesn't happen. Let's go to biggest challenges. I always like digging into these. Some really interesting stories tend to come from these. I am curious, and whoever wants to dive on this one first, let's talk about some of the biggest challenges, or let's talk about the biggest challenge you've had in growing your business.
I'll go first. So for me, my biggest challenge was approaching business from being an art student. You know, I mentioned going to art school and all that stuff. But I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. But there are a lot of tools that I brought to that I didn't bring to the business. So things like, what's a profit and loss statement? Or, you know, should I hire an employee? Like, I didn't know any of this stuff until I absolutely, you know, I was at a critical stage where I needed to figure that out. And for me, the way I look at these sorts of things is trying to be the dumbest person in the room. And maybe you guys have already heard this phrase, but for me, that sort of helped me tackle all my challenges, whether it's an accelerator program or having the courage to hire someone who makes twice your salary, who's much smarter than you. These sorts of things can help you tackle those challenges and give you the courage to keep doing it and looking for the gaps and challenges, you know, in your business going forward.
Both brilliant pieces of advice. I'm going to go back and listen to the recording because I'm at a decision-making point to scale. And I'm like, right, let's just go find, you know, let's go find the person that knows all the things that I don't know. I love that. Brian, let's go back over to you. Biggest challenge.
I think there's two, and maybe I'll sort of, you know, focus them, one internal and one external. One internally, and just actually really is kind of a segue from the earlier comments about values and retaining and holding strong to one's values, especially as you grow. That's really challenging. So we're now at about sort of 30, 35 people. And so, you know, the founder's values become the team's foundation, which becomes the organization's culture. And culture is a hard one to manage, especially when you want to hire, and to Ryan's point, when you want to hire really great talent. They may have some of the basic same value set as you do, but they probably think really differently than you do. And so when you start having really transparent and open conversations about really challenging topics, it can be difficult to maintain a really strong and cohesive culture in the face of really just different perspectives, especially if you really believe in diversity and inclusive discussion. So you start having discussions around, for example, what's a living wage? What should we be paying our employees? I live in a region that has very expensive housing costs. And so the living wage, frankly, is no longer, isn't really not relevant. And so people are like, well, you have to pay me more if you want me to work here. And we go, oh, how do we do that? There's no margin in this. And so on and so forth, where, values start to rub up against business viability are really challenging conversations in the context of building a healthy culture. So that's one internal challenge that is ongoing. And I think, all of us have to sort of look at, especially if we start growing past, a handful of people. Externally, and this is maybe more relevant for our company than maybe others, but we really see ourselves as trying to be an activist company. It isn't good enough in my mind, and most of my shareholders agree with this sentiment, and certainly my senior management team do, of like, it's not good enough if we just make something and sell something. And frankly, and with no disrespect to the NPS, sort of metrics, it's not good enough if my customers are happy. The question is, what can we do more that's better, and more for our community? So the multiplier effect, or, providing employment, or actually making a positive, ecological contribution to our community or our building community. So once you kind of establish that one of your values is actually to be an activist, is to try and make a contribution, where, again, I sort of mentioned this earlier, where does that stop? Like, where's that ceiling ever going to stop? And so you're constantly trying to chase an aspiration or even an ambition around making a positive contribution. And it's that goalpost keeps moving on you. So that's a big challenge, and it can really sort of take away from operations, and you end up not working enough in the business because you're trying to work on the business. So that can be a real sort of challenge and dilemma, again, especially as you grow.
I think we're all notorious of moving around goalposts, let alone taking, all the world's challenges, and yet we're still entrepreneurs, right? So we're always seeing the next big opportunity. And I love that you're so dedicated to that in an activist way. Brian, thank you for sharing that with us. Sam, over to you. Biggest challenges other than, people making bad decisions on fire roads out in the middle of BC.
Yeah. Well, I know everyone's tired of talking about COVID, but for a tourism company, COVID was by far the biggest challenge for us. We launched in 2019, like as a soft start in the season. So we hadn't really built up any operating capital by the time COVID came around, and it was a big challenge because we'd geared our product towards a certain target audience, which was more towards the sort of international market, and all of a sudden that market wasn't there, and we had to stop and relook at what market was available and what we could adapt and change to, and redesign our product and pricing to match that, because what we had created was not what was necessarily being needed by the market that was available to us during 2020. And actually it spun off a new brand that we launched in response to that. Through our research, it was kind of obvious that there was a lot of people out there that had their own vehicle, but didn't necessarily have the gear, and they didn't necessarily want to buy a rooftop tent or all of the gear to go and do a backcountry adventure, but they still wanted the advice, they still wanted to go and have that adventure, but they just necessarily didn't want to go and pay for a fully handheld, fully equipped rig. And so we actually launched a new brand, Vancouver Island Rooftop Tents, last year, which was geared straight towards people that have their own vehicle and they can rent a rooftop tent or gear and still get that experience, but at a much more sort of lesser rate, and more geared towards sort of the 3 to 5 day trips and that sort of thing. So it really took a lot of pride, I think, was the one thing to sort of like say, or swallow your pride really, to say, well, okay, this is the product we created, but this is actually not going to work right now because this target audience that we've created this product for no longer exists. They're not there. So what can we do to change and to adapt to the situation that's in front of us right now?
So you said 2 words, and it's not on script, but I want to go to each of you because I don't think we talk about it enough, is operating capital, funding. And I'm curious, just from each of the 4 of you, maybe if you can just quickly say, because I do want to get to Q&A, where has your capital, where has your operating, where are the funds funding your businesses, especially in the startup, where did they come from? Because I don't think a lot of us early in the journey know the opportunities that are out there. So whoever wants to jump on that one.
I'm here, so I'll start off first, if that's all right. So I came from a number of avenues. We right at the beginning, we worked quite closely with Small Business BC to develop our business plan and to look at avenues for funding. We got our initial funding from the sale of a previous business that we had in Malawi, which we reinvested into FarOut Wilderness, along with a business loan from BDC for the initial startup investment and operating capital for the first year or so. Brilliant. Which was not enough in hindsight.
Wait, is it ever enough?
Yeah.
Really? What about the rest of you? Everybody's
I'm similar.
Because they bootstrapped.
We're all just thinking about all the things we need. Very similar to Sam, I worked closely with Small Business BC to develop my business plan, and then they put us in touch with Futurepreneur and BDC. Similar, totally came in too conservative and would have asked for a lot more, but we are now looking at more dilutive options, and we're actually currently doing a seed round and going out to market for that.
Perfect. Brian or Ryan, what about you guys?
So speaking of equity, we raised capital. We did actually 4 different rounds of raising capital. Started with friends and family, leveraged that to buy the farm. Started making some beer and leveraged the product to find some preferred shareholders. And then we did a crowdfunding round and brought on 150 investors from across the region. And I'll just add, the biggest value of that was not the money we raised, but rather the now owner customers that walk into a liquor store and say, well, I have some shares in that company. I guess I should buy that 6-pack. And they become, a real base of not just customers, but supporters, even when we've gone through hard times, like with the Agricultural Land Reserve or with COVID, et cetera. Our big shareholder base has been super valuable to us, not just for providing the capital.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that time and time again is, when people buy in, they really buy in, which is all part of the story and all part of the growth. Ryan, what about you?
Bootstrap. Yeah, we've never done any lending or anything, but we have a really good relationship with our commercial bank, and we have a line of credit if things, if we really need it. But we've just been bootstrap.
Fantastic. Thank you all for sharing in that. I think it's really important to highlight that and have people realize their options. Now, I know I did skip over biggest challenges, so I'll let I don't think Nicole, I don't think Ryan, you spoke to that either. I'm so engrossed in the stories that I apologize for jumping over on that. Who wants to, Nicole?
Biggest challenges for me, aside from having a baby during a pandemic, certainly has been around capital. Primarily, it was really kind of growing our business so that we could start achieving some of these economies of scale, which would allow us to access better discounts and really start improving that margin, so we can start exploring new products and services that we'd like to bring on board. So it's kind of been a bit of a tap dance between kind of looking at how we can grow faster, reduce our costs, improve those margins to have the cash to invest in new products and expanding into new markets. So that's been kind of everything we've been trying to do in this kind of bubble of the pandemic over the last almost 2 years.
Great, thanks. Ryan?
Yeah, I did speak a little bit about that. So coming to our business with an art school background.
Right, thank you.
So yeah, again, being the dumbest person in the room. That's all I'll say about that.
Thanks for facilitating the facilitator back on plot. So I know we've got about 13 minutes left. Do we want to go to questions? I say as I look for John in the audience.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions here, but we'd also be happy to hear more from you. But maybe I can jump into a couple of questions, and then if we don't have any more, we can go back to the things that you had to speak about. I'd like to thank everybody. It's so great to hear about these businesses that I've been familiar with or I looked up beforehand, and then to hear about that journey, how it started off. It always makes me think of learning about movie stars and how they do the same things we do, seeing a developed business, a successful business, and then hearing about that journey that you go through, which is so relatable to so many of the clients that I work with that are sort of just getting off the ground now, and to be like, oh yeah, okay, they do go through the same things. Like, this is what that journey looks like that I'm on right now. It's so refreshing and encouraging to hear about. So thank you all so much. As a first question, we have a really interesting one. How do you decide on the size of the business? Do you feel it's best to stay small or grow to get those economies of scale? And how do you sort of stay true to your culture as you go through that and make that decision? And I'm just gonna leave it open to whoever wants to jump in.
Well, while our panelists think about that, I think I would turn everyone back to are you clear on your business's purpose? That's going to help you determine how big do we want to be. If it's community focused, then that is your focus. What are your own personal levels of comfort? How does that feed into your values and who you are and how you come to the table? If you don't want it to be an empire, then it doesn't have to be an empire. I think we get sucked so often into the shoulds and we need to grow a big business. I mean, small business, the definition of SME goes all the way up to 25 and in some circles, $50 million. So I would suggest, and I'll let the panelists jump on it in a second, is how big do you want it to be to achieve the vision that you have, whether that's a vision that serves your family, whether that's a vision that serves your community, and that fulfills your purpose. What about you, team?
I kind of think it's up to the business at a certain extent to decide how many people you need. Like for me, I didn't know I needed an operations manager until, I started to see like I couldn't be a proper leader unless I had someone, who was smarter than me again, coming up with ways to make the business more efficient. Or, I didn't know I needed a people and culture leader until recently, to help that operations manager help our staff, and deal with things like culture and sort of promoting our core values. So for me, I want to see how far I can push this business. And it also comes down to comfort level. Like, are you, like when I got to that crossroads and I was crying in the park, are you the type of person who sees that and goes, okay, I'm going to do it? Or, I'm happy just having a hobby on the side. Like there's no wrong answer and there's no shame in doing either thing. It's that risk tolerance and that appetite for the unknown. I think that's going to answer a lot of those questions.
Mm-hmm. Great answer. Other thoughts?
I think I just want to lend some thoughts from kind of a Indigenous female entrepreneur. Is I know I really struggled with really knowing why I wanted to go into business. I had dabbled with different small business ideas before, but I don't think until you've really kind of gone through kind of the full journey, you can really start to articulate what it is you want to get out of it. And I find that when I talk to a lot of other startups is they're not quite sure what they actually want to get out of it. They might have their social purpose nailed down, but in terms of like, do you want to grow this into this kind of massive empire that you maybe sell off one day, or do you just want something that brings you a steady income? It can be really hard, and we're kind of in a culture a lot of the time where we don't talk about those things, and it's uncomfortable to talk about outrageous ambitions. Do you want to be Elon Musk, or do you want to just kind of keep a nice steady home-based business where you can balance your time with your family? I think it's just kind of getting better at practicing understanding what it is you like and saying those words out loud and really being truthful to what you want to get out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Being truthful, recognizing self, recognizing one of the things that I want to riff on that is so much of the language about building business, empire. Well, an empire served who? The king in the castle? Who had a voice in that empire? There's a lot of war language that comes going into the war room, coming up with, different terms that surround strategy. And I want to recognize that this is all colonist language. And so being able to strip back, well, what have we learned and what just is because that's what we've learned and that's the way society has been, especially right now, especially as we move forward, as everything is opening up again, we all have a real opportunity to evaluate something as simple as language. And that is going to open up different opportunities. Sam or Brian, did you want to add to that question?
Yeah, I think I won't jump any more onto sort of like this, like how big you want it to be. But one thing I would say is, speaking from experience, is making sure that you've built a solid foundation before you grow. We definitely, not with this company, but with our other one, grew very quickly too fast, and it did implode, and we had to reel things back and then rebuild it properly. So if you're looking to build something big, make sure you spend the time to build the systems and the processes and all the boring stuff that nobody necessarily talks about, but it's really important to have a sort of a viable business.
Yeah, systems and processes are not sexy, but I can tell you they will make you very happy when they're in place, for sure. Brian, what are your thoughts around growth size?
Actually, the only thing I'll add is to the latter part of the question around how do you maintain, sort of that value set and that early aspiration as you grow. And sort of jumping off where Nicole left off was around talking about it. We've found that having really open and transparent conversations, both with our staff team, our shareholder group, as well as the community, is really, maybe the most important aspect of really understanding each other and understanding what our culture is comprised of, and publishing that I've found to be really effective. Like when we put it on our website or we put it on our social channels or wherever we put it out, more and more, and of course this is a sort of, there's a slippery slope into sort of, calling people out in cancel culture and all that. But I've found for our company that it's been really great. And our community then knows who we are and then either chooses like, yeah, I'm behind that and support it, or wait, I have a problem with that, and opens the dialogue even further. And so being really sort of public facing with some of our, culture aspects and elements, I think is one of the ways to maintain a strong organizational, dynamic while you grow, while you add people, and while you add customer base.
Great points. It's all about dialogue and determining how transparent you want to be. But what I can tell you is knowing the next generation that's coming up and hearing the things and listening to conversation is they're more concerned and most concerned about who is the company, who's behind the company, who's driving the company, and what good is the company doing in the world. And I can see that you're right homed in on that conversation as well. So that's great. John, what else do we have from our attendees today?
Yeah, I think
who wants to know what?
I think we just have time for one more question, but
Okay.
an interesting one. How do you decide which partners to work with, and how do you go about finding people or businesses with values that align with yours? And this one was, I'm going to go to Nicole first, because that allows me a chance to also say congratulations, because I understand today is your 4th year in business. This is so a big happy birthday to Raven Reeds as well.
Yeah, thank you. Finding partners. Yeah, so we definitely look for partners that certainly are aligned in values. It's been kind of, the last couple of years have been kind of a sensitive place to be for an Indigenous brand. You are quite vulnerable putting yourself out there with the amount of attention that consumers are placing on wanting to know authenticity behind a brand when they're making those decisions at the checkout. So we look for partners that can not only add value to the product that our subscribers get, but that we can also be providing that support back to our partners to help them grow and improve their offerings. So we recently did a collaboration with Powwow Pitch, which is a pitch competition across Turtle Island. So it's open up to everyone in Mexico, Canada, and the US. And we did a similar kind of gift box offering with them. But it's just been so incredible how well we found synergies between our audiences, and clearly there was value alignment. And so we really look forward to kind of using that as a model going forward to look at other ways we can maybe not be so competitive with similar product offerings, but look for those synergies where we can actually help both grow and improve opportunities for Indigenous entrepreneurs.
Anyone else want to jump on that?
Well, I'll just add, I mean, I mentioned it before, the B Corp network is really great for this. So finding your networks, I think, is one really sort of natural way. But my cautionary note is start small and really sort of start from a relationship-based perspective. Who are these people that we're thinking about partnering with before, and really understanding each other before diving into a business project. But my encouragement would be to take some risks around this. I personally feel like building an ecosystem of entrepreneurship and business people is, a big part of the social fabric of our society. And so the more partnerships we can have, yeah, we're going to make some mistakes. We had one terrible mistake with a partner that just blew up in our faces. And, a couple of years later, it's water under the bridge, and we've moved on. We've had dozens of partnerships since then, and they've all been, most of them have all been really fruitful and beneficial to both our company, their company, and our community. So I'd encourage looking for, lots of opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. There's some key questions for the person who asked that, and for the rest of you is, whether it's hiring someone, whether it's bringing on a partner or making a strategic partner agreement, there's some key questions you can ask yourself. And one of them is, does this person or does this company believe what we believe? And will engaging with them or hiring them help us fulfill our purpose? Do they, and are they excited? Do they believe in, and are they excited by our vision? And engaging with them or hiring with them or making that decision, will it help us achieve our vision? And coming back to the values, are they aligned with, and do they demonstrate that they live our values? If you have a no answer to any one of those questions, I would say run for the hills, or come up with a really good dialogue to talk that through with them. Because if they're not aligned and there's kind of that, friction because their values aren't aligned, or they're only in it because of, I don't know, the easy pick away is profit, there is going to be a constant rub there. You want a good marriage, you want a good fit. And you're going to find that you're going to get better at it in choosing time over time, because you're going to notice, and it's going to get more and more refined. But definitely asking those questions can help. How are we doing for time, gang? John, you're our moderator for that.
Yes, I think we are ready to wrap up now. I think we've timed things quite perfectly. So I just want to read one of the comments that are here, just because I think it really says something about what we've talked about today. So it just says, just a comment, I'm so happy that business is looking at core values and how they develop business, not only for more profit, but to contribute to their communities as well. Very inspiring. I really think that sums up a lot of what you've talked about. So I really want to just say a big thank you to each of you. And I've really found this to be informative myself, and I'm sure that's the sentiment that comes out from all of the audience there. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing everybody at the final presentation today.